Hello and welcome to Concert Pipeline. I'm Steve Jones. Today on the program we have Peter Holsapple. You might know him from the dB's, who he's recently reunited with. We're going to talk about that, as well as so much more. He has so many more interesting things that he's done in his career musically, other bands he's been a part of. We're going to dive into his music interests and passions, instruments he plays, and some of the shows he's done as well. So we'll get into that in just a few minutes here. We'll bring Peter on in. Before we do, I want to welcome everybody to, I don't know, I think this is the second episode of the year for Concert Pipeline. We're starting a little bit slower for those that have followed the program. I love duck hunting. It's a big part of my winter. From the end of October all the way through the end of January, I got ducks on the mind, and that's pretty much all I'm into. So I take a break from the podcast for a couple months, maybe sprinkle a couple in here and there where I can. But bands also kind of wind down around the holidays. And things kind of slow. There's less musical releases, less tours, that sort of thing. So I don't feel as bad about taking a couple months off. I've started doing that the past couple of years. My duck season has officially winded out. Next weekend, I have a late goose hunt, and then it's all done. No more birds until the end of October at this point, in which I hope to bring my son out with me more and to get over the course of the months leading up to October, get him into the hobby a bit more as well. Get his hunter safety done, shooting plays, shooting cans and stuff first. Get him started with it, because I think there's a lot of value to that, and it's something that I would love to share with my son. So hoping to do that. My last hunt of the year was not actually a duck hunt. Technically it was, but we weren't going out for ducks, and I didn't shoot any ducks. But I went out shooting with some friends on a refuge, and it just laid out perfectly. I went up the night before the hunt to the refuge to get on a list to lottery and hopefully get on first thing in the morning. I ended up getting a great lottery spot, which allowed us to be able to get on. And then we had to wait a long time. There was a lot of competition also, so I was super happy with that I got a great number. And then I get back to the car, and the car wouldn't start because my daughter had her phone plugged in and didn't know that it would drain it. My fault, really, but I had to share that knowledge with her as well about the why that it happened. And we got a jump. There were a lot of people there, so someone right next to us was able to jump us and get us home. And then the next morning we went out and we shot a bunch of snow geese. I mean, we shot like 34 snow geese. It was incredible. Bringing them all back to the car at the end of the day also was quite a task. A lot of work involved in lugging that many big birds, back to the car. And I spent the next day watching football and breasting them out so that we can make goose sausage at the end of the year. At the end of the month, I guess that's going to be at the end of February. It's something that I like doing over the past years with buddies. We get all of our ducks and geese that we haven't eaten together. I can process them, combine it with pork and seasonings, and make sausage out of it. And that's really enriching and enjoyable to get to do that with friends, and then have food that I can eat throughout the year. Really, I'll probably have at least 15 pounds, maybe about 15 pounds of sausage at the end of the day. It takes us a better part of a day to do it, but it's just fun. We hang out and have beers and tacos and all of that. And so that hunt was just so memorable and great. And even though I have a late goose hunt that I paid into, this one that I didn't have to pay into, pay back in so many ways. We had many passes, number of times, a couple of times even, where there were 5 or 6 that geese that we dropped all in one shot. So, but it was had a lot of fun. And my dog Navy, she had such a great season. And that hunt also, she brought most of the birds back for us, and it made me so proud, and has made me so proud over the season, that into the duck dog that she's turned into, and how on point she is. She's become a big part of our hunting group and really proven herself over this season. So that's the big reward for me, as well as being able to get my kids out on these hunts. So I've taken my son out 3 times to observe, and took my daughter out once, and those were really really enjoyable for me to get for them to get some insight into what it is that I do and the craziness of my hobby. So another hobby, music, concerts, that sort of thing. Got some concerts coming up that I'm looking forward to in the coming months. I'm going to see Eric Hutchinson with my son in March. This month, actually, I'm going to see Ben Gibbard in San Francisco. He's doing a show as part of Noise Pop. That's Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie and the Postal Service. So we got that this month. We got Eric Hutchinson in March. In April, AC/DC down in LA at the Rose Bowl. I'm interested in seeing what LA is looking like by the time I get down there. Really, really sad series of events over the fires. So lots of concerts coming up and more to talk about later. So Peter is here, and let's go ahead and bring Peter in on the program. Yeah. How's your day treating you, Peter?
What's that?
How's your day treating you so far? Your morning?
I got in late last night. My high school band had another show, a group called Little Diesel. We played, this is like the first North Carolina band probably that was like completely informed by the Nuggets compilation that Lenny Kaye did. So all of the stuff that we do is like garage rock from when it was kind of new, you know. So, but it was really neat. We'd worked up a bunch of songs that we hadn't done before. Remembered a few songs that we had done back in the 1970s when we were playing originally, and we had a sold out show. So
Well,
happy
that's
about that.
awesome. And
Yeah.
how'd you get back together with them?
Well, Will Rigby, the drummer for the dB's, is also the drummer for Little Diesel. So we played together in that band for years. Our lead singer, Bob Northcott, who was an IT guy at various universities around the country, came back to Durham, was working for NCCU, and then retired. So he had more time. And then Phil Thomas, who's our bass player, and Tom Eshelman, who is our other guitar player, are still in Winston-Salem. They've kind of slowed their work down, so we had time to do it, and it was kind of great. And we finished the dB's thing last year, which was great, a wonderful experience for everybody, I think. And we had such fun playing together again that we kind of said, well, we don't even really need gigs. We just like to get together and rehearse, and play songs
Yeah.
together. So that kind of enthusiasm is really, really effective and really just makes you want to do it more. So I'm happy. I'm happy to have this back in my life. Believe me. Believe me.
The shows are the icing on the cake. It's really about getting together with the guys and playing the music, from when you were younger, and reliving those memories, right?
Well, it is, and playing it for a lot of the people that were there then, which was nice. And then there's this whole new generation of people who've sort of picked up on what we were doing, and that's kind of cool to see, people with hair in the audience. I will note that Will's mom, Ann Rigby, who is 94 years old, was there. That's like her second dB, her second show in this year. She went to the SECA show, the North Carolina Museum of Art show that the dB's did for the last show on our tour. So she was great. It was great to see her there. But she's like our other mom, I mean, I've just known her since I was growing up. Will and I go back to third grade together. So
Wow.
we've been friends for 62 years, something like that. And all that time Ann Rigby was holding court at their house. So the whole Rigby family is dear friends.
The mom who will crowd surf at the shows and
Good Lord, I hope not. I hope not. I think that
you don't want that.
even with a sold out show, it would have been a little dangerous to send Miss Rigby around on the hands of her beloved supporters.
Maybe a little bit. Yeah. So let's go back to those early days a bit. So first off, tell me a little bit about the environment in your household. Like what were your parents listening to? What was on in the house when you were growing up?
Around my house, um, there was this big Magnavox stereo, like so many people's family rooms in the 60s or living rooms. And so we had that, and we had an interesting batch of instruments around. My mom played with the idea of learning to play guitar. somewhere around 1962 or so. I don't know what precipitated it. She also started working on her Great American Novel around the same time. Neither of which actually came to fruition. So there
No.
was a guitar around the house. There was a piano. My brother, who was 11 years older than I, was classically trained on piano, and we had a pump organ that my crazy uncle had converted with an Electrolux vacuum cleaner so that it had a steady flow of air going through it instead of pumping the pumps at the bottom, the pedals at the bottom, which presented its own kind of issues because when you hit more than one note and you have this steady stream of air, everything gets very quiet. So suffice to say, nice idea, didn't work. My brother
Mhm.
was also of the generation where people either gave their kids accordions or the little Fender steel guitar sets, the Champ sets, with the 6 string steel guitar and the screw-in telescoping legs and a little a Fender Champ amp. The theory being that if they can make a noise out of an accordion or a steel guitar, they may be able to figure something out. Now, the end, I think it was an M&E accordion. So M&E, Emenee, the first name in toys, is
Uh-huh.
a toy, which I learned, of course, I learned later on when I was producing the band Pianosaurus, who performed only on actual toy instruments.
Oh,
Uh,
that's awesome.
but later for that. Um,
Yeah.
but we had those things. My father had a bowlback mandolin that had belonged to his father. And apparently there was a point, my dad was a Harvard educated, Harvard Law School trained lawyer from many generations of Holsapple male heirs going way back. Um, and some at some point at Harvard, both he and his father were parts of the Harvard Mandolin Club. Now, I don't know that there was a lot of music being played. You see a lot of pictures of a lot of guys sitting there in their coats and ties with the little mandolins in the proper position, but I tend to think it was probably a social gathering and people got together and had some other kind of fun, maybe with beer. Um,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's just a guess on my part, but so I had all those things sitting around, and my brother, who was classically trained, put numbers on uh, a an octave of the piano
Hmm.
and wrote out things like "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" with the numbers
Right.
and in big numbers for me to put on the music rack on the piano and try to figure out. And apparently, I figured it out really quickly. Um, and at some point, he said to my mom, "Don't get him piano lessons. He knows what he's doing." So there was that. Then there was that fateful night where he had leaned into me a couple days before, and my brother said, "Peter," in his best snarly older brother voice, there is a group that is going to be on the Ed Sullivan show on Sunday night. I really think you should probably see them. They're called the Beatles. I think you'll like them very much. And well, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you could say. So I found mom's guitar and I found her songbooks and I started teaching myself chords. And I asked my parents if I could take the guitar to school to play for them, and they were like, "What do you mean?" And it's like, "Well, I've learned to play some songs on guitar, and I had to do a recital for them. So I did "Till There Was You," which was on the first Beatles record. I did probably did a Beatles song, may have done a Love and Spoonful songs because
Mhm.
those were sort of my deal at the time, and they were like, "Okay, well, take it to school." So I started playing and playing, and I got a Golden Beatles songbook. All the while, there's a piano and an organ around, right? So I go to the piano,
Yeah.
and I'm like, these numbers that he wrote out a couple of years before, they kind of match up with what I'm doing at the left hand of my guitar. And so the sort of the math of it all was making a lot of inroads for some reason or other. I'm not a math guy, but
Yeah.
the sequence of music gets louder, music gets higher, music gets more intense. It's all kind of on a planar kind of thing, and I kind of learned that all at the same time, which was really handy. And then I started going to school band and church choir, so I got some ensemble stuff too. Now, in answer to your original question, my parents really did not do any music. My brother and I
Okay.
were kind of the first people in our family, and I don't know whether the only people in the family, but certainly the uh, most widely recognized as musicians in the family. And I'm the only
Yeah.
professional musician in the family. But
Right.
happy to break the mold. What can
Oh,
I do?
for sure, for sure. Do you remember the first concert that you went to? Like, was it notable and uh, like, do you have memories of that?
Um, when I was a kid, I went to see the symphony all the time. The symphony orchestra the Winston-Salem Symphony Orchestra, conducted by a guy named John Iule, Iuele, and it was a wonderful, like, in the mold of Bernstein, a very vivid conductor. And so I think that's part of the beauty of a great symphony orchestra, is the sort of the watching the ballet of the conductor as they lean into the music and get everybody coordinated. So I saw that growing up. I went to a lot of choir things. I competed in choir competitions, like at Duke Chapel. Voice soprano with no training, very valuable. I could hit the pitches, but I didn't have the trained vibrato thing. So it was kind
Right.
of cool. I was like the folk singer guy. Folk mass was really good for me.
Y-
In those
Yeah.
days. Rejoice, I think, is the one that our church used. So I did all that. And I went to the first concert that I went to. I want to say it may have been James Taylor at the Greensboro Coliseum when I
Wow.
was like 15. And I feel like I'd been to other things. I feel like I had been taken to things at White Chapel, because I did
Right.
see a lot of shows. I mean, Winston-Salem was not really a destination. You went to Greensboro if you were a big band on tour. So we got a lot of Jay Giles band played Greensboro all the time. Alice Cooper all the time. ZZ Top. Oh,
That's awesome.
fabulous
Yeah.
show. Great shows growing up. But the James Taylor show was really great because, it was the section behind him. So it was Danny Korchmar and Lee Sklar and Russ Kunkel on drums
Uh,
and Craig Doerge on piano. And it was great. So it was around the time of Mudslide Slim also. I think it was like really fairly early in his career, but he was wonderful. And James Taylor is, like his brother Livingston, a really criminally underrated acoustic guitar player. And that
yeah.
guy could do a whole album of guitar instrumentals and it would knock your socks off. He's just that kind of player, and he makes it look so easy. We
Yeah.
North Carolinians are very proud of James and Livingston and the whole Taylor family.
Oh, for sure. And you mentioned Leland Sklar. And he's amazing too, and has so many stories. I've had him on the program once or twice, and yeah,
Really?
yeah, with the immediate family, and those guys collective have done everything, worked with everyone. I mean, it's an incredible group that they've got, and just such a history of each one of them. So
I'm really glad that that movie came out in
oh
particular,
yeah,
because, in fact, my friends and I were talking about this last night. We being the people that have the never-ending record collecting conversation going on since we were like 14, right? So here we are 50 some odd years later, still talking about this stuff and thinking that the reason we know all this stuff, like all those guys in the in that movie, and in the section, and Joe Mama, right? So these are all those various things that they all did. The reason we know all this stuff is because we absorbed everything that we read in Cream magazine, in
oh
Photograph
yeah,
Record magazine, in Fusion magazine, all those amazing, Crawdaddy. specifically leaving out one of the magazines, which was a better magazine in the 1970s because it actually was focused on music rather than popular culture as a whole. But the other ones that were really specifically music, and we got to read liner notes,
Right.
that is the sad casualty of the streaming world, is that you don't get to
You,
sit
you
there.
don't have that anymore. You can't just pull out the booklet and read and see who worked on it and kind of
Yeah.
read the notes and the thanks to these people and actually see the lyrics as easily. It's just
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, I'm not a big publish the lyrics on the inside of the record, but I think I have leftover anxiety of Houses of the Holy when we finally figured out what Robert Plant was actually singing, and it was like, oh,
it's not what you're singing along to exactly.
let's
Yeah.
keep the mystery here, shall we?
I know. That's always great. And
My
and so
record, my record will have liner notes, which is a good thing, and you can read it, and it's got vinyl and beautiful graphics and stuff. So that's
you
good,
got
right? I'm doing my
yeah,
part.
you're doing your part there to keep it alive for sure, for sure. And of course you mentioned the Beatles, and that was 1964, but you had Dana and the Blue Jays that same year, right?
Something like that. The Golden Beatles songbook.
Mhm.
Learn a song, turn the page, learn a song. Those that songbook was so frustrating though. And I'll tell you why. So, you know, you learn the basic chords on a guitar. Are you a guitar player at all?
No, I wish I was. I wish I had that in me, but
There's still
no.
time.
There's still time. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that because
Yeah, get a
I don't
cheap
know.
Yamaha acoustic guitar and a chord book, and
Okay.
just
Mhm.
start with the first chords and see how they all fit together and listen to what they're doing. So where was I going with the songbooks?
This
Yeah,
is- yeah.
those Beatles songbooks, you want stuff that says D and shows you a D position, or A, or one of the two A positions, maybe not the one where you lay your finger all the way across because you don't have strong fingers yet. But these Beatles songbooks had these like weird bar chords of like the C position up on the fourth fret, where you also had to put your finger down as the kind of ersatz capo. It's like, I can't do that
Yeah, I
yet.
don't do.
I want to play this song now, but I can't do that yet. I got to figure out how to do this. So, necessity and all that. But I was able to pick this stuff out, and that was really handy. So, Data and the Blue Jays was basically all Beatles songs. You know,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
are you going to do? Two acoustic guitars, a drummer with a snare drum and a cymbal. Who I am actually back in touch with now, courtesy of Facebook. I hadn't gotten a chance to speak with Dana Olive for many, many years, and he's doing great. So um, it's really neat. Maybe I'll get him to show up at one of these shows one day.
Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be
It
cool.
would.
And so I want to talk about Chris a little bit. You had a handful of groups with Chris, starting with Rittenhouse Square, right? Um,
Oh, before that too.
oh,
When
even
Chris,
before that. Okay.
so just the quick paragraph on Chris. Chris grew up as Mitch Easter's best friend. His parents were best friends with them also, their parents. So they were very close growing up. Mitch immediately was a guitar player and had been playing with like the school stage band. He actually had a casuals gig at a hotel lounge as a teenager, a young teenager. So he was miles ahead of everybody all the way. But he and Chris got into the electronics and the model rocketry. So they had this sort of science guy thing going, which was good. Chris sort of focused on tape recording, and he had a lot of recordings of people. When Chris finally took the plunge and bought a white Hagstrom bass guitar and put nylon strings on it, my friends and I, who were like a year younger, were like, he's ours, you know. Come play with us. We're gonna do this right. We learned from the Beatles songbook, so we know how to play these songs. And and he was completely amenable to it, which was great. And so we did a group called Soup, I think, and played at a talent show. Made
Yeah.
$25, went and ate sandwiches at the local Roses cafeteria counter after the show. A great, great celebration of perfection. So then Chris and I had another band all the while there's a Rittenhouse Square going. There's a first group, and there's this massive second group that's got Mitch Easter, and it's got local legend bass player David Niblock, and it's got a lead singer and an organ player who's got the biggest Leslie rig you've ever seen. It's like 4 Leslie cabinets, and I mean it. Very massive looking thing. Learn to play Yours Is No Disgrace by Yes, note for note. This is the kind of thing that as kids, you're standing there kind of marveling. And they did a show at our high school auditorium, and Chris and I were standing in the orchestra pit looking up, talk about larger than life. It was just larger than life. And these are guys that are like 1, 2, 3 years older than me. But it was still, at that point, the difference between 16 and 14 is immeasurably large.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I'm sort of like, oh my God. And I finally, the switch went off in my head and said, that's what the Beatles are doing. That's what they're doing on TV. Not those people that are out there playing the kiddie shows and stuff, who are very good, but they're not the Beatles, and they're not this. But this is, and this is, and I'm like, think I could do this. And Chris, meanwhile, is like got the recording going and stuff like that. So I'm like looking at him and I'm thinking, we should do something. So we had another band, and that was really good. And then I went off to prep school for a year. And I played with some cool people there, including Ben Montench, who ended up as Tom Petty's long-time keyboard player. And Ben Mont is a dear friend. Love him so much.
Oh, that's awesome.
I learned so much from him at prep school, even that 1 year, just watching him play, how to block out chords to make the sound, to make a sound so you're a part of the sound and you're not sticking out of it, don't leave your thumbprints on stuff. So, because if you play it right, that's your thumbprint. So I came back from prep school, scared, scarred, smarter, all that, and I guess Rittenhouse had decided they were going to break up the big band. It was too unwieldy. What do they say? Ego problems or something like that? I don't know.
Right.
You have ego problems when you're a band full of 16 and 17-year-olds. I don't know. That's like playing the blues at that age, right?
What do you have to sing the blues about? So
yeah, I'm sorry. You got a guitar that looks like a Scotch tape dispenser. This is what you're sad about.
Yeah.
So the big band broke up, and so Chris and I were called upon to join. I was called upon because of my keyboard prowess, of all things. Never mind that I was anxious to play guitar with Mitch Easter in a band, but Mitch had gone and bought a Hohner pianette, great little electric, sort of plucky, not a clavinet sound, but it's a different set of tines in there. It's a really great sounding. So we had that, and we worked up all kinds of stuff. I mean, the first 4 songs we worked up, 3 of them were Wishbone Ash songs. So I was getting that guitar stuff in with Mitch, and we learned all that stuff. But we played, as with most of the bands in Winston-Salem growing up, we played feeling like, these are great songs in our record collection. We think you might like them too. Now, you may not have heard of them, but by the time we're finished playing them, maybe they will have made an impression. For example, at that point, I would say almost every band in Winston-Salem played Better by You, Better Than Me off of Spooky 2 by Spooky Tooth, which was one of our very, very favorite bands of all time. Still are. Still brand all those records, well, with the exception of maybe Mass, but most all of their records are amazing. And if you look up some of the stuff that's on YouTube with Mike Harrison and Gary Wright singing together, and oh my God, I'm a sucker for any 2 keyboard band also, like Mott, or the band, when you get a piano and an organ going at once, it's all very.
It's a nice touch. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rittenhouse did that. We worked really hard. We worked up some of Mitch's songs because Mitch had already been writing and had done some recording with his previous band. And we went into a recording studio on Easter weekend of 1971 or 72, I guess, and cut 6 songs. and Mitch sang a lot of them. I sang a few of them. Bobby, who was our drummer, sang one of them, and we had Bobby had 500 copies of it printed up because you could either get 100 copies with covers or you can get 500 copies in paper sleeves. So we got
One
500
of the sleeves.
paper
Yeah.
sleeves. Not very protective, but that's what we got. And
Yeah.
so that's the record that's out there on YouTube and on Discogs listings for obscenely high prices. You know,
It's a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
I got that song on my new record called That Kind of Guy.
Yeah.
Have you listened to that song yet?
Yeah. I don't remember that one specifically, but remind me.
That's the record collector song guy.
Okay.
The
Okay.
one about I got a Love Supreme, I got a Soft Machine, sort of a laundry
Yeah.
list of recording. But my whole thing is I've also worked in record stores for many, many years. And there are people that buy records so that they can have the record. There's
Right.
people that buy records so that they can play the record. There are people that buy records so that they can resell the record at a higher price.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
I'm never really sure with the advent of YouTube
Yeah.
and with the fact that you can actually access and listen to the aforementioned Rittenhouse Square record from 1972 when we were young and wet behind the ears. I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't want to just do that instead of paying, rent for a month to have a vinyl copy that doesn't even have a cover.
Right. Yeah.
You
Seems to
know,
make a lot
I
more
mean,
sense to just go YouTube. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't mean to be altogether too pragmatic about it, but it's like, I don't know. I don't like to spend, I'm realistic. It's 2025. I don't really want to spend $25 for an album. I'll do it.
Right.
But I know that for $25, I can go to the basement of the local record store and walk out of there with 10 perfectly good, slightly scratchy records that I'll play, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't need to have the collector's items anymore.
Yeah.
I've got the soundtrack playing in here 24/7 anyway. So, I, there are a few things I'd love to have again. Sure.
I do miss buying CDs. I'll tell you that. And like I've been interviewing bands since I was a kid, and so I used to buy the band's album or get it from the publicist sometimes, or whatever. But I did it a lot of the times, and then take it to the shows where I'd interview the bands and get them to sign it. And so I've in my closet a couple hundred signed CDs. Which you could hold and you can open, like you said, with the liner notes and see the artwork throughout it and everything. It's obviously it's much easier. I got Apple Music now. It's just everything's at a click of of your finger, but it's not the same. You miss out on that piece of holding an album and having
even to the point, and I'm being sort of sour grapes about it, but for many years I have bought the Oxford American music issue. Do you know that magazine? That lovely it's a literary magazine most of the year, but every year for many, many decades now, they have done a music issue, and it'll focus on a southern state, North Carolina or Georgia or Memphis, Tennessee specifically, or New Orleans specifically. And for years they had a CD accompanying the issue, and they'd have they'd have great writers in there writing about stuff. Some impressions, some are very scholarly looks at like the music of Eddie Hinton or a great country artist, Charlie Poole or somebody like that. And so that's kind of your liner notes, and you've got the CD with it. Now it's a download,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And I realize that it's still, the music is still there. And realistically, as I have said, the music is in your head, and once it's in there, it's there, which is nice. But I don't know, there was something nice about the discovery of slapping it in the player.
Yeah, I missed that for sure. So So let's talk about the DBs a little bit because you actually had to audition for the DBs, like they were already in existence, and and then you auditioned for it. So tell me about that process with auditioning
Well,
and getting into the
I,
band.
I'd been living in Memphis for a couple of months and was not having a really great time. I did some recording at Sam Phillips' studio with a guy named Richard Roseborough, who was an adjunct of Ardent Records and Big Star, a very, very good drummer, sorely missed. But we did some recording there and basically turned it into demos for things I was going to do later with the dB's. But I was kind of frustrated. I didn't feel really comfortable in Memphis in a way. So I got a call from Will. Meanwhile, all this whole summer had been like unbearable moisture and heat in Memphis. Firemen, policemen on strike at the same week. National
Mhm.
Guard with snipers downtown, curfews. I'm like, signs are pointing to maybe you should get out of here. So I had been going to the public library some days because the air conditioning was delightful. And so I would look at the Village Voice and I'd see ads for Chris Stamey and the dB's playing clubs like Max's. And I'm like, oh, that sounds great. And then, like 3 months into being in Memphis and just being frustrated, I got a call from Will saying, "So Chris would like you to maybe come up and audition on keyboards for the dB's." And I'm like, I could do that. Sure.
Yeah.
So I get on a plane, get up there. We go to a rehearsal studio. Chris has got this little Ace Tone top one red combo organ. And I'm like, okay, well, show me a song that you want to do. And so we started working on it and we started rehearsing and we learned some songs. And they wanted to, Chris was cool about it and was like, you got any songs you want to learn? And I can show you. And so, Will and I, having gone back to school band, immediately had the rhythm guitar connection, rhythm guitar and snare drum. So we were tight. And that really allowed Chris and Gene to go where they were going to go on guitar and bass and have a kind of a substantial bottom to work from, I think. And so we did that, and we played the first show that we played was a Halloween show at Irving Plaza, and we sucked. We were terrible. Middle of the bill, we just didn't. I don't know. It was like when the when it's like PA's on, ladies and gentlemen, the Chris Stamey, the dB's, and it's like, uh, what were we supposed to do again? And trying desperately to get through each song. And then we actually have some pictures of us after the show, and we all just look like somebody ran over a loved one. You
One
know,
of those ones that you thought you're surprised there was another show after that, huh?
well, all I could think was, I think all of us were just like, let's woodshed. Let's just really go for it and get better. And we did. We took 6 months and got really, really well rehearsed. Worked on a lot of the songs that ended up being on Stands for Decibels. We recorded a lot of that on a 4-track. Those songs, a lot of those came out on a record a couple of years ago called I Thought You Wanted to Know, 1978 to 1981. And because Chris in particular and Gene as well had really learned all that time how to do great recordings on 4-track. They learned how to bounce, they learned how to keep the fidelity while you're bouncing, they learned how to use effects judiciously, so it didn't sound like I mean, I'm sitting at my studio and I know I have a plug-in in here, a mastering plug-in that says uh demo saver number 1. It's like, oh, so these are the things sonically that I'm missing. But Chris, like I said, Chris and Gene both are very adept in the studio, and so we were able to make those 4 tracks sound really good. And then when we went out to play again at Hurrah, opening for another band that we were friends with, we blew them out of the water. We were so much better, and it was really great. And it felt like, I mean, there's the rare gig where you get off stage and you're sort of like, yes. And I think
You've had
we
the feeling.
all, and the dB's not being emotionally very demonstrative people, I think we were going like, yes. And that
A
was
little
fun.
bit more reserved. More reserved, yes. Yeah.
I'm
Um,
going to leave the room now.
exactly.
Okay,
Hold
I'm
the
back.
excitement in. Hold the excitement in. Yeah. Speaking of excitement, so Stanford Decibels, came around a few years later, and that one, I mean, it really kind of helped the DBs make their mark, I think, right? So tell me kind of about that experience and what that did for the band.
Okay. Well, it started with singles. We had done black and white for a label called Shake Records, which was Alan Betrock, our friend who was the first publisher of New York Rocker magazine. The dB's and New York Rocker magazine's history was interlocked in so many ways. So we did black and white and did that, and then had been given some money to make some singles for an imprint of a New York label on Warner's in the UK. But that all sort of fell apart, and we ended up with tracks. And so we were like, okay, well, maybe we should just make this into an album. We've got 6 songs, got black and white, and that's finished pretty much. What about these other? We'll get this. So we fluffed it into an album. And Alan was friends with a producer, sorry, what would you say, a publishing company in England through his record collecting friends, called Albion Music. And it was Derek Savage, rest in peace, um, uh, Mark Anders, and Di Davies. And they had this great little concern. Di had been part of like Fame Pushers, the people that had brought Brinsley Schwartz to the to the Fillmore East. They flew the journalists over, and everybody got so severely trashed that all the good reviews that they were going to hope for turned into just this like free alcohol um, dog pile on Brinsley Schwartz and their management. So, but nonetheless, so he knew the value of a good publicity thing. So they said, we'll sign Chris and Peter as songwriters. That's great. So, so they did that, and we were trying to shop the record around. It sounded pretty good, I think, and it didn't feel to us like it was something that was complete. It wasn't like trying to shop Philosophy of the World by the Shags. We had something a little bit more conventional and intuitive, I think. And so when it didn't get picked up by an American label, the nice people from Albion Publishing said, "Oh, we also have a label, and it's a kind of a neat label. We've got Hazel O'Connor, and we've got some really good. We got Ian Gom. Would you consider putting it out?" And we're sort of like, "Yeah, let's do that." And then that's when the fun began, because Albion was full of these incredibly talented, smart, funny, witty, droll, inventive people in the marketing wing of things that came up with stuff like putting the first LP cassette into a bean can, and those came out. And when we went to England to do a promotional tour around the time of Stanford Decibels, we went to the Virgin Megastore on Oxford Street, and there in the front window was stacks of those cans, and the album, of course, around, but just stacks of them staring back at us. We're just sort of like, this is wonderful. And that would have never happened without the kind of genius people at Albion. And we got to go over there. We went over with a bunch of New York bands for a show in February of 1982 called Taking Liberties. And it was the Bongos and the Bush Tetras and us and the Ray Beats and the Flesh Tones and another band called Polyrock, who were from New York but really didn't have a lot of truck with the rest of us for some reason. They had a nice record that was produced by Philip Glass on RCA, but we didn't really, it was a different kind of world from the rest of us. The rest of us all practiced either at the music building, or we all played at Maxwell's, or we had, I like to think that I coined the phrase, and I probably didn't, but camaraderie. I've always felt like we were all really friends. The bands were friends. We would hang out at bars together. We'd go see
Yeah.
other bands. We'd see each other at shows. there was none of that sort of competitive aspect of things, I don't think. I always felt like whenever any of us had a success, we all got to share in it because it opened the door a little wider for us. Like when REM became hugely successful, that made it people that, I mean, to their credit, they took bands like us and
Yeah.
Indigo Girls and NRBQ and Driving and Crying. Oh my God. Throwing Muses.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, that's what you do. It's like George Clinton when he got his record deals and he was like spreading it around. So there's Brides of Funkenstein, and there's Bootsy's Rubber Band, and there's Parliament and Funkadelic, and he's just like
Yeah.
keep it going and just like make more music with it. And so that was a great, great time. And getting to go over there, and then we toured with the Ray Beats through the clubs in England, and that was fun because we loved the Ray Beats. They were big pals of ours. In fact, Danny Amos, who was the bass player, who took over from our late friend George Scott, um, was the Danny that we came up with when we tried to figure out a better name than Johnny in Amplifier. So Danny went home and killed himself last night. It's not about Danny Amos, but we usurped his name. So we're the great usurpers on that one. And it was
Yeah.
good, and the English audience was sort of, I mean, it was a weird time to go over there because there was a lot of, the Human League and synth pop and things like that. And here we were with guitars and combo organs, you know.
Yeah. And you mentioned REM, that they're the ones who put in a good word with IRS to sign the dB's, right? So you kind of have them to thank for that because, I mean, through your work with them, right? So,
Well, yeah, I mean, REM and I went way back to before they had a single. They had a, a manager named Jefferson Holt, who was also, prior to being manager of REM, was a record store owner in Chapel Hill. And I knew him from there because I was still there when he was operating a store. And I had a lot of friends that hung out there and stuff. When I moved to New York, we kept up conversation, and he wrote and said, I got this band I'm producing, I'm managing, called REM. Where should I go to make a record with them? And Mitch had just brought all his stuff back down from New York rather than starting a studio up there. He ended up starting Drive-In in his parents' garage in Bellows Creek, North Carolina, right outside of Winston-Salem.
mhm.
That you should go to Mitch, and he will be the right guy for you because he listens and he is a good sounding board, and he will help you find what you're looking for, and he won't make a big deal out of it. You guys will get along. You guys will talk about funny stuff. He's really smart. So they did, and they cut Radio Free Europe and Sitting Still and an instrumental called White Tornado, and they put it on a cassette, and I didn't listen to it for about 3 months. I don't know why. Friends put
It
it in.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about it. Put it in the cassette recorder, and I'm like, oh, that is so good.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like, this is what I was hoping for all along with all this stuff. So we started hanging out. They come up, we drink in the Lower East Side, go take the Staten Island ferry for cheap. I'd go hang out with them. I went out on the road after they put the single out, and they had Chronic Town coming out, I believe. And they had been signed to IRS. So went on the road with them as an opening act and guitar tech for a month of dates in the Midwest, just hopping in the van with the five of them, the band in Jefferson. It was all over the place. So,
Yeah.
and they were very lovely with the dB's. They took us out on a couple of tours. And yeah, after we did 2 records for Albion in England, the second one being Repercussion, and we still couldn't get a label to get to play with us if we tied a pork chop to our leg and begged them. But so no American label. Why? I don't know. If
Yeah.
we knew, we'd know. But we finally got signed to Bearsville Records, which was when we signed with them, was an imprint of Warner Brothers. That was the home of people like Todd Rundgren and Foghat and oh gosh, so many people on Bearsville. The first 2 Sparks records were on Bearsville. It was run by Albert Grossman, Dylan's manager for many years. We signed to them. We made a record called Like This. Chris Butler was the producer. It's a beautiful record. Had a couple of what I think were hits, were like Love's for Lovers, Lonely As Lonely Does, White Train, songs like that. Really some good stuff. I had to rise to the occasion because Chris had left after Repercussion. So I was the sole songwriter. So I think I did that. I think I came out with a bunch of great songs. Record came out immediately, almost within the week. Bearsville lost their distribution deal through paperwork with Warner Brothers. Now, that's bad for us, but what was really bad was there was a beautiful pop song called Just When I Needed You Most by a guy named Randy Van Warmer. And it was a lovely song. And it was just cruising up the charts. And all of a sudden, no distribution. Bye.
Nothing.
Hold on.
I've heard that so many times when, like, I mean, management changes levels, things change at the label, and these great pieces of work are either, in that case, that one was released, but some of them get shelved and then don't see the light of day ever, really, because of that logistical garbage. It's such a loss.
If I had a dollar for every review, comment, passing thought that sort of started with, in a better world, the dB's would ... Sorry, not a better world. We're here. We got what we got. It is what it is. We're perfectly satisfied with our legacy. We are a very proud group of musicians who made several records, and I think they all are above average plus. I understand that we don't have. I think maybe what it was when I heard the REM tape was they've got a singer, and I realized the dB's have people singing that aren't really singers.
Right.
I again, going back to the boy soprano with no training, right? There was a guy I sang with who was a boy soprano who had years of vocal training, and he had a perfect, smooth, pear-shaped tones and vibrato that was evenly matched. And I'm out there, and I'm, I don't know what I am. I'm like itinerant folk singer or something, in from the fields. So, it points out why, in the bigger scheme of things, I think that the dB's didn't have the triumphant kind of run of success that some other bands did. And I understand, I can't do much about my own voice. I'm comfortable with it now. And I am actually in a position where later today, when I get home, I'm going to go see a cantata at Duke Chapel with my wife as part of our 22nd wedding anniversary festive week, since we can't remember what the actual date is. So we have a week of it.
Just estimating, yeah.
But when I come back, I have to sing something for somebody in my studio, a vocal part for a guy in New Jersey with a marvelous song. And he asked specifically, I do a lot of like instrumental overdubs for people. I do organ. I can play 16 instruments passably. I can make your song. My business card says, I make you sound more like you do. And so
there you go.
Again, that's the idea of not leaving fingerprints all over stuff. But I rarely, if ever, get people to ask me to sing on something. So I was like, so we're talking about my voice, right? You want me with my voice to sing on your beautiful song, right? He says, I think it'd be a great personality. I'm like, okay, I got it. It's the personality voice you want. I can do that, sure.
We can do the personality. We can't reach
I feel like Mel Blanc,
Yeah.
So I'm going to do that, but it is funny to think about that, especially in light of having a new solo record. And
let's talk about the new solo record, The Face of 68. So it's coming out in April, and so tell me, first of the approach that you took with this one. So why was it the right time for this album for you?
Well, I'd made a solo record called Game Day a few years ago, and I figured that the statute of limitations for prosecution were up, and I was able to actually go back and make something different. And my wife, who is maybe the smartest person I know, oh, what the hell, she is the smartest person I know. We talked about it, and I had made a big point with Game Day of wanting to be the guy who played all the instruments on all the songs and sang everything and produced it and engineered it all myself, which I did. Now I've done that. I don't have to do that again. It was an interesting experiment. It was ultimately produced a record that I think the songs are great on, but I have many uh, uh, issues with the production now. You know, you can't really, it's hard to step away from yourself when you're wearing all those hats.
It's got to be difficult, like directing a movie that you're starring in or something. Like, how do you kind of? I mean, what
Yeah,
a challenge! Like,
you're financing it and stuff. I mean, I did finally take the hard drive over to the studio called Overdub Lane, which is about 6.5 minutes away from my house. I mentioned this because it will figure prominently in this conversation. But I went up there with the engineer that I knew there, and I said, "Can we just listen to this stuff? Am I nuts? Is this releasable? Will you listen to this? Will you tell me what?" I feel like I'm missing a component, and of course, the component is having somebody in there to listen with you and say, "You could probably get this better if you did this one more time," or "You got this a track before. You don't need to do it again." So I didn't have that. So the engineer was like, "Oh yeah, it's great. It sounds good." And it's like, okay, all right, well, so I'll finish it up. So I did that and I put it out, and I didn't get a lot of traction with it. And I realized almost immediately it was because of the methodology that I used. So smart wife and I are sitting around the breakfast table, and I say, "I've got some songs. I was thinking maybe I should make a record." And, sometimes that's when alarm bells go off in the house, and sometimes like happy, beautiful, peaceful music plays in the background. And that soundtrack started up, and she said, maybe what you should try to do this time is get a producer and do it with a band and do it in a studio and make it a kind of an immediate kind of thing and figure out who the producer would be and where you would want to do it. And I'm like, that sounds like a really
not
savvy
bad
plan.
advice.
Sound advice, indeed. So started thinking about it. Okay, there's this studio, and I've been playing lead guitar for a band called the Paranoid Style for a couple of years now, which is a late in life shift out of my comfort zone as rhythm guitar player with Will Rigby for 60 years, whatever, into the guy who has to take the lead breaks and figure out how to compose a lead section so that it's cogent and it has a start, middle, and ending. All these things that I don't always fobbed off on these brilliant guitar players that I've gotten to play with. Lucky me. Well, now it's a different thing. So, having been inspired and having gone to Overdub Lane for many years and worked with Paranoid Style up there, I was thinking, well, could go to Overdub. That's really close. It's a comfortable vibe. I know the owner. The owner is the guy, Wes Lachaud, who is a fantastic keyboard player who actually was the fifth guy on stage with the dB's on this tour and took great pains to make sure that the keyboard parts were exactly like the records. He brought in horn parts. He really took our sound up several levels to the point where I would say people that came to the dB shows in 2024 got to hear the songs they wanted to hear performed in an incredibly, brilliantly competent, intelligently done versions of these songs. So I think that everybody was very satisfied with that. So Wes Lachaud. So studio, we like the studio. Let's go back. Let's use the engineer that I used with the Paranoid Style. This guy Jason Richmond, who is wonderful, Grammy nominated. Worked with this marvelous artist Margaret Glaspie. I don't know if you're fans with her. She is
Yeah.
really brilliant guitar player and songwriter. Look her up. She's really
Okay.
good. And then I was like, well, okay, rhythm section. So then I thought, I know two people that I'd love to work with. One is Rob Ladd, who's currently the drummer for the Connells, but he was the drummer for a group called the Pressure Boys here in North Carolina in the 80s. And he has been through all sorts of stuff. He lived in LA, worked with Alanis Morissette, Don Henley. He was the drummer, oddly enough, for the Red Clay Ramblers, this local folk legend band here for many, many years. He's done everything, and he's great.
Oh,
And he was actually in the Continental Drifters for about 6 months also, a
oh, okay.
transitional drummer. And just great, soulful. He played with Dixon for many years. And so he said, well, you should probably get Robert Sledge to play bass. And I'm like, oh, I like Robert. Robert is very good. I'd heard him play with a lot of people, and I played with him in other capacities and stuff. But I hadn't really thought about him because I just figured he'd be priced in the stratosphere. But he was the bass player for Ben Folds Five, among others.
Oh, okay. Wow. Nice.
And now he plays in a great group called Charles Latham and the Borrowed Band. Wonderful. So I'm like, okay, so they're in the section. They like each other. Score.
The win. Yeah.
They work together well. Score again. To deal with that. We don't have to like make sure that the gloves match, you know. Okay, so the only thing we need is a producer. So I made a short list of producers. And I was like, the person that would really make you the most comfortable and would listen the most and do all the things that you really need is Don Dixon. Because you and Dixon go back to when you guys were both teenagers. And you, Peter, were 14 and you were watching Don, 17, playing bass in a group called Arrogance, performing incredible heavy stuff like the first Black Sabbath record, note for note, 6 months before it came out in the US. Brilliant stuff. Arrogance had the best single in Winston-Salem in the early 1970s called Black Death. Also, if you never find that's something that you can find on YouTube.
Okay.
But Dixon and I go way back, and he's done so many productions, and he's recorded my songs, and Marty Jones, his wife, has recorded my songs, and he calls me in for like gigs to play keyboards or guitar on. Always a great listener, and I know his studio MO, and I really
Yeah.
like that. So I called Dixon, and he's like, I'm in. So we booked 4 days at Overdub. Went in and cut 11 songs, vocals, overdubs, background vocals, some percussion, most percussion, keyboards. We were done in 3.5 days.
Wow.
And,
Impressive.
well, I'll tell you what, when we didn't practice going in either, I had sent them demos that I'd done, and they just knew, they had the charts, they knew where the songs were supposed to go. It really just took us running them a couple of times to get comfortable with it. And the biggest thing for me was to get comfortable with handing over those tasks to Robert and to Rob and to Dixon and to Jason. That way I can concentrate on being the lead guitar, rhythm guitar, singer, and get those parts the way I wanted them. Because
Right.
by and large, Dixon and I went into this process agreeing that the original arrangements were spot on. They didn't need a lot of work. He did a couple of tune-up things on a few songs to tighten up some arrangements, for which I am eternally grateful. But a lot of that is straight out of the kitchen of Peter Holsapple. So, and I'm so happy with the way this all turned out too, because it's just, it hangs together in a way that a record full of self-recorded, self-produced songs would not.
Right.
It has the benefit of the great Mike Locker at Overdub and the great recording engineer knowledge of Jason Richmond. And he knows that room, and he knows that board, and he knows those speakers. And they've got a great amp collection. They've got a smoking B3 and a beautiful grand piano, and everything in there functions, which is really nice. It's not like, oh, look at that. Let's use that Lowry or no. Sorry, that doesn't work. It looks good though. You want to see what it looks like when it's all lit up? I can't. I don't want the toys that won't work. I don't want a room full of broken toys. But we also were able to sort of make it into an immediate project, which was great. We kept the illusion going that people have when they get a record that's been made in over 6 months and mixed over 3 months. That, oh, they walked into the studio, turned record on, came out with this, and it's like a movie, right? You want people to just assume that it was like this seamless. It starts at the beginning, goes to the middle, and ends at the end. You don't see what's on the cutting room floor. You don't see the hours of matching stuff up and dialogue. And, with records, it's the same thing. It's like you want something, though. You don't want to see all the, it's okay to have some rough edges, but you don't want to see all the, false starts and stuff. That's why I'm fine with box sets, but
Yeah,
I don't need them myself anymore, except for the Faces BBC box set. I would take that
I take that one. Yeah,
any day.
and yeah, and so as we wind down, look forward though. So and move past the dBs, which you toured with this past year. Are you going to tour on this album? Or are you going to be playing
I
some?
am. Excuse me. Dixon and I and Murray Attaway, who was the lead singer and songwriter for a group called Guadalcanal Diary. The three of us are going to do a couple of songwriter shows in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and in Richmond, Virginia, in March. And so I'm going to kind of dust off the acoustic guitar for this stuff. What I'm going to try to do is I want to do some shows in a band form because this is really great, harder edged music than I have been known for. If people heard The Face of 68 as the first thing that they hear by me,
Right.
I think that they will appreciate it for what it presents, which is a guitar, bass, drums, vocal oriented record with harder edge songs with riffs rather than a acoustic guitar, highly compressed, a lot of vocals, baroque arrangement, power poppy kind of thing. Now there is, I mean, She and Me, which is the last song on the record, probably the most power poppy songwriting on there. But everything else on there has got kind of a different vibe. And so what I've been trying to do is make sure that I've got these songs ready to go on acoustic guitar because touring budgets being what they are in 2025, it's going to be harder to. I can't really drag a band around with me. I could
Right.
probably find a rhythm section in town and get together with them for a day and go do a show, and I don't mind doing that if it's simpatico players. But I realize the logistics of it are going to dictate that I'm going to have to go out there with acoustic guitar and vocal, and as long as the songs work in that format, then I can get them across. So
Yeah.
that's the plan. I think there's plans. Hopefully, we didn't touch upon the Continental Drifters, my other
No.
band, but we are making some plans to play late in the year. We had a best of come out last year. We had a
A book. The
biography
book.
of the band
Yeah.
called White Noise and Lightning, and then we also had a tribute CD called We Are All Drifters, where I had people like George Porter Jr. from the Meters and Marshall Crenshaw and Rosie Flores all doing Continental Drifters track. It's just awesome. So another band I love, and we get to do that. I'm a lucky fellow,
It's,
I've got so many great projects, and I turn 69 next month. I got nothing but the future ahead of me.
happy early birthday. And yeah, no, that's exciting. I mean, getting to just live all the these different projects and kind of have all these different outlets that you get to express yourself creatively in and do what you love, right? So that's what it's about.
I feel like it took a while for me to also between learning how to appreciate all of it and be graceful about it. It's like that whole thing of like at the end of the show when somebody comes up to you and says, "That was a great show, man," and you say, "Yeah, but we were out of tune in this song, and I couldn't, I broke a string and stuff like that." Instead of saying that and giving a laundry list of all the reasons why it wasn't good, it's really just as easy to say thanks. You know,
Yeah.
Appreciate it a lot. Glad you enjoyed it. And you can keep all those things to yourself. It's not going to break you. People come from miles around to see you sing and play your songs. And that's a real privilege and should be treated as such and not as some kind of like horrible job you're stuck with, or something that you want to avoid, or there's people that do not like to meet their fans. I'll never understand that.
Mm.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's implicit. I think it comes with the job description that you go out there after the show and say hi, and listen to some stories and find out what your music means to people and why they've come after 42 years to see you. That's just
Yeah.
me, but you know, I think that's responsible stewardship for your own catalog and your own career.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They invest in you and your career. You should, take a moment to listen to how it affects them, right? So it's not bad.
You hear incredible stories. I heard a story from somebody the other night that was like, had been listening to music and then took time off and raised children and kind of didn't listen to anything anymore. And then the kids grew up and moved out of the house and stuff like that. And she started getting records again. And she heard The Sound of Music, which was the last contiguous dB's record from 1987, the one on IRS. And she was like, man, I know every song on here. And it's like, what is it, like 35 years later, I guess, after the record came out, and we were hearing them again. And it was like, and she had to tell me about it. And I was like, this is the glorious power of making music and writing songs and how they affect people. You can't buy a story like that. That's just incredible. It makes you
Yeah.
feel so good. It makes you feel you just want to reach out and hug them and say thank you, because the joy that your music brought them, the story is bringing back to you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, Peter, I want to say thank you for taking the time today and sharing your stories and the path. And I mean, so many great moments that you've had, and you have this new album coming out as well, so it's not slowing down. Yeah, just thank you for taking the time. I appreciate
Thank you. I hope you get to a show sometime this year. We'll keep you up to date, and
it.
I hope you got a good editor.
Oh, I forgot. We keep it all in. It's all natural, so it's all there.
I didn't use any four-letter words, I don't think, this time, amazingly enough.
Those are
Coffee,
allowed too. If you want to throw some of those in at the end, you
nah,
can.
second coffee just hasn't kicked in hard enough yet. Have a great day, and thanks for talking with me. And again, I appreciate you rescheduling this.
Of course, of course. You have a good one as well. Okay, Peter.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Bye. That was the interview with Peter Holsapple here on Concert Pipeline, and that takes us to the final segment of the program, the music news. A couple of stories to wind out the program today. We'll keep it a little bit short, but there's a lot going on at the same time, so I'll kind of hit some of the headlines here to wind out the program. Okay, so we'll start with SNL, which Saturday Night Live, known for having music artists of all different genres and styles on over the 50 years that they've been doing their show. They've announced a concert. They're celebrating their 50th year this month, actually, and have a concert that's happening in New York. A lot of artists are going to be playing, and it's one of these ones where I could probably just play a few songs each, but you're going to see so many stars if you make it out to that show. So this is the homecoming concert. It's taking place Friday, February 14th on Valentine's Day. It's going to stream live on Peacock and kick off this celebrations. It's Jimmy Fallon's going to be hosting. Lauren Michaels and Mark Ronson are the show's executive producers. It's in New York City's Radio City Music Hall. Some of the artists that have been announced are Backstreet Boys, Bad Bunny, Brandi Carlile, Chris Martin, David Byrne, Jack White, Lady Gaga, Miley Cyrus, Post Malone, Robin. There's also more. Eddie Vedder, Jelly Roll, the B-52s, Bonnie Raitt, the Roots, of course, will be there as well. Mumford and Sons, a ton of artists. So you can check that out on Peacock if you want to see probably a pretty cool show with a lot of artists who've been on Saturday Night Live and pivotal to their history. Okay, Sum 41 wrapped it up. They are done. They did their final farewell tour, and they played their final shows on January 30th. Their final show in Toronto. There's of course video of it if you want to check that out. Tour of the Setting Sum, and it was a pretty extensive set that they did. Didn't want it to end really. The band's frontman Derek Whibley posted on Instagram the next day's writing simply "Thank you" alongside an image that bears the slogan "Sum 41 RIP." So doesn't seem like he plans to bring it back. It always happens. It's going to happen. So wait 10, 20 years. Sum 41 will be back 20 years older and playing songs, but they played a 29 song set ending in "Welcome to Hell." Oh, that's one way to end it. And the band has apparently been becoming stronger over the past couple of years since Derek Quigley had some medical issues. So they ended on a good note. Jeff Goldblum has announced a new album, Still Blooming, featuring Ariana Grande, Scarlett Johansson, and more. He has also shared the lead single, The Best Is Yet to Come, with Johansson. And Cynthia Erivo is going to be on it. It's his fourth studio album in total. He's reuniting with the Mildred Snitzer Orchestra, and it will be released on April 25th. Of course, you can pre-order it. And my son Atticus is pretty excited that Ariana Grande is playing with Jeff Goldblum since they were both in Wicked together. So if you like Wicked, maybe you'll like Jeff Goldblum's new album with Ariana Grande. Speaking of a new album, David Bowie has Ready, Set, Go, a live album that's going to be released for Record Store Day this year. It's a one-off concert. Saw him perform his album Reality in its entirety for the first time ever. And it's going to be released on April 12th. It's a double vinyl LP and CD. It's going to be in collaboration with Record Store Day, and it took place in Hammersmith, London, on September 8th, 2003. It aired in 86 theaters across 26 countries and featured a Q&A segment with Bowie himself. And it's going to feature the complete 11-song set that he performed at the special gig for the first time, as well as 3 previous unreleased tracks. To celebrate the announcement, the live performances of New Killer Star has been released as well. So you can check that out in April if you're interested. Okay. Smashing Pumpkins' Billy Corgan is going to be interviewing Gene Simmons, Tom Morello, and more. Corey Feldman is on that list. Billy Corgan has a podcast now, so he's got some pretty notable phone numbers in his phone, I imagine, from years with Smashing Pumpkins. So The Magnificent Others is the name of his podcast. It's probably released by the time this podcast drops. And yeah, Wednesday, February 5th. Okay, so it's coming out in a couple of days. And it's going to be available to watch via the Magnificent Others YouTube channel and streaming platforms, of course, Spotify, Apple Music, all of that. You can check that out. And yeah, let's see. Richie Sambora is going to be on it. Pat Benatar, also some others. So he's already got a handful of interviews in the bag that he's going to be bringing there. No Doubt reunited for second time in 2 years. This is at the LA Fire Aid concert that happened this past weekend. I watched a lot of it, and I watched the No Doubt performance live. There were a lot of other performers and surprise appearances at the show. No Doubt performed a medley of their hits as they reunited once again. It was like 15-minute performance, but they didn't. They didn't rush through it. They took their time and played Just a Girl and Don't Speak and Spiderwebs. And Gwen Stefani led the crowd in boys versus girls chant of I'm Just a Girl lyric. It's No Doubt, and I want them to tour. I want No Doubt to tour. I want to see them again live in this life of mine, preferably up close. But I have those memories of being super close at No Doubt shows and to live with. But I'd love to see them again close. And they need to come to the Bay Area and play a show. That's just what they have to do. They played Live Aid, and then the last story we'll end with is the biggest thing is Live Aid, which I didn't see live because I went to sleep. Figured I didn't know there would be these monumental moments that I would really want to see live. But there was a Nirvana surprise reunion set at Fire Aid with St. Vincent, Kim Gordon, Joan Jett, and By the Grohl. Uh, I guess people are naming it Hervana because they're all female vocalists leading the band. But uh, uh, it was Dave Grohl on drums, of course. Chris Novoselic from Nirvana came out for the gig. The surviving members of Nirvana were back together for the first time since their 2014 induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and their secret after show. And so they were the second to last act of the evening. They played right before the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and it's reminiscent. It's reflective of when they opened for the Chili Peppers on tour in 1991, after the two bands released Nevermind and Blood Sugar, Sex and Magic on the same day. And when Nirvana played their Hall of Fame induction a little more than a decade ago, Quartet of Women stood in for the band's late frontman Kurt Cobain. And last night, three of those four women once again joined the band. So kind of there's a lot of reflection going on here, and I just remember seeing a post like a couple weeks ago when this Fire Aid concert was announced, and someone had asked Dave Grohl whether Foo Fighters would be playing the show, and he said he didn't know, and that kind of made a little motion with his face. And the Foo Fighters didn't play, but it was great to see Dave Grohl back out there because I think this was the first show that he's played since he kind of canceled himself last year over some of the marital stuff he's been going through. So I'm glad to see him back out in front of audiences. I'm hopeful that we get a Foo Fighters tour in 2025. Some new music maybe from the Foo Fighters. If this Nirvana thing wants to hit the road, I'm down for that too. Anything with Dave Grohl in it, I'm in for. So it's great to be able to close out the music news once again with a Dave Grohl story, as we tried to do every week back, a couple of years ago when we were able to do that. It's just always great. So thank you for tuning into the program today. Don't have anything solid lined up right now, but a couple things in the works for the coming weeks and some fun stuff as well. So hoping to keep the shows going pretty soon. For all of us here at Concert Pipeline, I'm Steve Jones. We'll catch you next time.